1917, they had a typhoid epidemic, and what they came to conclusion of what was causing it. Dr. Grout was our first medical officer here in Huntsville, and he said, well, they tested the water, and what it turned out to be was that people would come into town riding horses, wagons. They would tie them up at the courthouse, and the horses and mules and things would go to the bathroom there,
Right.
and it would leak down into the cave underneath.
Brilliant.
And then it was upstream of where they were pumping.
Right.
And so when they started pumping the water out to people, they started getting sick.
Right.
And so they came up with several ordinances about not having your horses tied up at the courthouse.
And this is like 1903, you said?
It actually occurred several different times, because apparently, like, they would say, okay, don't put your horse out there at the courthouse in like 1908. Well, by 1917, everybody had forgotten about that, and it was kind of it was just it's something that's hard. People have been doing that for ages,
Mm-hmm.
and so to get them to stop doing it was difficult.
Right.
And after a while, people kind of forgot about it.
Right.
And then they started going back and tying the horses back up.
Right.
And then they got sick again.
Right. Brilliant.
So, anyhow, that's part of the history of the Big Spring Cave. Eventually, what they did is that they had the pumping station right there at, I think it was a little rock building, and I believe it was there for years and years. I don't know if it's there now. And eventually what they realized was they needed to tap in further upstream.
Mm-hmm.
So they started going around and checking wells that people already had.
Mm.
Well, the Hick building was there was a series of cotton mill buildings there, and they had a well. And they went and tested that, and it turned out, eventually they found out that the water in their well was the water that came out the Big Spring. And so they sort of, eminent domain, they sort of took it over.
Interesting.
And they bored it out and built a building over it and everything.
Okay.
And so the city sort of took that over. Now since then, as the population increased here in Huntsville, they've done more and more drilling and tapping and taking the water out from the ground. They would first look at other wells and find, how much they had of the water.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually the north half of the city gets from various wells around. And I understand you can actually take a tour, I never have, of the well pumping stations. It's the kind of thing that, they take school kids there.
Right.
And because the general population is usually not too much interested in that type of thing.
So, but you don't know anything about necessarily whether our system of caves would impact how tall we can safely build downtown?
Okay, the courthouse that you see there now is either the third or fourth courthouse that's been at that site. And, when they first built that, Huntsville was just a little town, and wasn't much there. And gradually, as the town got bigger, they needed a bigger courthouse.
Right.
So they would tear down the old one and build a new one a little bit bigger.
Right.
Well, in '66, they tore down the old courthouse that was there and put up the one that you see now. And what they did is they debated on whether or not to put it on, because the courthouse sits over the top of the cave.
Okay.
And they debated on whether or not to put the courthouse in that same spot.
Right.
And they finally decided that they would do that. I guess they just loved that spot or something or other. Anyhow, so what they did is after they tore down the old courthouse, they dug a big hole in the ground, but they didn't dig out the cave.
Mm-hmm.
They left the cave intact where the water flows through.
Mm-hmm.
And what they did is they put in a group of 16 pillars. These are 8-foot diameter pillars, and they ran them down to bedrock.
Okay.
And one of the pillars actually does go through the cave. And we had a geologist come visit us here from England a few years back, and we have 2 people in Huntsville that were interested in caves, and they were actually members of our cave society. The National Speleological Society is located here in Huntsville.
Oh.
Usually that's news to most people. They
That's
never
news to
heard of
me.
us. So anyhow, Ben Farrell was city geologist and a member of our cave society, and then Warren Campbell later on joined the city as city hydrologist. And I hadn't been there for a long time, and he may be gone by now. I don't know. I hadn't really checked in with him. Warren Campbell eventually moved up to Bowling Green, Kentucky. He got a job at the university up there. So anyway, the British caver that came over here was a geologist, and he was writing a book on how caves have affected the urban environment.
Mm.
So he was interested in seeing the Big Spring Cave, and they took him down in there, and he took some pictures. And he actually got a hold of the plans that showed the 16 columns. I knew that there was one column that went through the cave because I saw it I've been in the cave and surveyed it. And but he had the plot of all 16 of them. And so anyhow, the cave has always had part of the history of the Huntsville area.
Yeah.
And there's several articles that were written back in the 1900s or so, where they put in a canoe and paddled for 2 miles. Well, the cave's 3 blocks long.
Probably not.
So they were just making it up as they went along. They just, you couldn't believe a word they were saying.
Yeah, well.
I don't know why they were doing what they did or saying what they said about it. But the one group, at one time, they thought the cave might have run. There's a Maple Hill Cemetery over there toward the mountain, and they thought maybe the graves were polluting the water. And somebody said something to the effect that they thought that the cave ran over that way, but it doesn't even get out of downtown Huntsville. So it's about 3 blocks long.
This is interesting. Thank you. I'm Kathy.
I'm Bill Terode. I'm the librarian for the Cave Society.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
How do you spell Terode?
Terode.
Terode.
That's my last name. T-O-R-O-D-E.
Awesome.
2 T-O and Road, R-O-D-E.
Awesome.
My dad's from, you ever heard of Guernsey cows?
No.
No. Okay. My dad's from Guernsey.
Okay.
It's an island in the middle of the English Channel between France and England.
Okay.
So, anyhow, it's kind of an unusual name. There aren't many people with my name in the United States.
Mine either. Rise and Wits. It's also unusual.
Oh, okay. Well, we got, the United States is, unless you're an Indian, everybody's from somewhere else.
Right, exactly. Awesome. Well, it was nice to meet you. I appreciate it.
Okay,
Is
I
your
don't-
contact info on the
I don't know if
website?
that helped you any with